Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Wolverine issue number 9. This was amazing. As soon as I saw the cover, I'm like, oh, please let it be exactly what I think it is. And it was. This was so wild, dude. Oh my god, this was so freaking wild. Let's get talking about who made this comic book so I can talk to you about the wildness of this comic book. So, this issue is called Bidding War. Sounds a lot like what they did in MODOK, issue number 2, right? MODOK Head Games. Anyway, writer is Benjamin Percy. Adam Kubert is on art. Frank Martin doing the color art, and letters and production by VC's Corey Petit. Tom Mueller does the design, and the cover art is by Kubert and Martin. Couple variant covers out there, including the Marvel versus Alien ones. Can't wait till that stuff starts coming out, like the actual stories. And the head of X is Jonathan Effing Hickman. Okay, so basically Wolverine as Patch shows up in Madripoor to go to a bidding war of a bunch of criminals doing a whole bunch of things. Now the one thing that seemed out of place was the one thing that was actually used against him, which I really liked in this. Like, that's the Chekhov's gun. Those gloves, I'm not going to tell you what they were. If you read the book, you know what they are. If you didn't read the book, know that it was fun, and you should go purchase with money the book, excuse me, because it was enjoyable. This was a very enjoyable, this was a very fun book. In fact, I'm so glad that this book came out at the same time that X-Men number 17 came out, because they both had very similar vibes from the 80s and 90s. The X-Men specifically from the 90s. This from the very late 80s, saying and early 90s. Wolverine is Patch. Let's be realistic. It was a stupid disguise that everybody should have recognized him, right? Well, in this particular case, people did. And it works so well. They see a whole bunch of things in here that are just like wacky, and it's like, okay, cool, little things here and there. And the main thing is that they actually see Maverick is here. Now, I was actually surprised to see that Maverick was used for a second time. I was surprised to see him used in the first place in the previous issue. Not too many people are fans of my man's Maverick up here, you know what I'm saying? But hey, all of a sudden, Jim Lee creation, here he is, right? And he was one of the things that they were bidding on. I was very interested in the way that all of this worked. Listen, let me actually go in, because I don't know yet what the previews are going to. I'm reading this before I saw any preview pages being released online. Um, just I hope that they're going to release these first things. Look, 16 panels, 16 perfectly aligned panels. Some telling a continuous story, some telling you shorter stories, some showing you a specific scene, a specific moment, like flashes of a memory. But look at the whole thing. The whole thing. Who'd that look like? Huh. Right? All of this, all of this is telling a story. White pages. There's another white page after this, if I remember quickly. Up. There we go. Look at that. There's a white page. That's the credits. It's not the same. I'm not going to go through the whole book like this, but when they did that, and there's a couple other pages in here too where they do that. This. I'm sorry. Dude, can we talk about the panel layouts of this? I mean, like, hi, this is the comic book. Now flip it to the side. There you go. Like, this is some Rob Liefeld stuff that they're busting out. Bro, it's like all of a sudden, the X-Men stuff, they're suddenly remembering what it means to actually, to remember, like, how to actually tell a comic book story. There's so many times when you're reading a comic book story, and you're flipping the pages, you're flipping the pages, you're flipping the pages. You're not twisting the book, right? A lot of people say bad things about Rob Liefeld. Oh, Liefeld doesn't know what he's doing. Blah, 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 blah. There are times Liefeld would be like, you can't read the book like a regular book. You got to turn the whole thing sideways and read the book like that. Why would you do something like that? Because it's fun, it's a comic book, and you should understand all the extents of the many things that you're capable of doing with a comic book. And Rob Liefeld is one of those people who, despite anything that you might want to say negative about him, one thing you got to admit, if you know the guy at all, the mother effer, the mother fathead, he knows. Some people be like, oh, we call it Professor Bell. The mother fathead knows what the range of a comic book is. Like, he understands some of the things that you can do with a comic book. As much as I love Jim Shooter, and Jim Shooter making fun of Liefeld, which is, okay, I get it, I understand why he would do that, but at the same time, understand what Liefeld was trying to do. And while Kirby was willing to make certain sacrifices in like anatomy in order to tell a great story, look at what Liefeld is willing to do. He's willing to change the way that you read comic books in order to have a different experience with comic books, so it feels like you're starting all over again with comic books. Also, I can't go enough into the amazing things that Liefeld was able to do with a comic book, but a lot of those are revisited, whether by choice or not, whether by, cognizant realization or not, in this issue of a comic book. Multiple differences just perfectly lined up, but telling a story. Not just like, think about the 3D storytelling involved with pages like this, right? Like, you could see a whole story being told, but little snippets all throughout. Little things are a little bit out of place. It's a memory. You're looking at the big picture. You're looking at the big picture, but there are also little things in there that are flashing, and that's how memories work, right? Every so often, just some little key word or key moment, some little sight, some smell will suddenly like trigger a memory. And it's like, oh yeah, and that's one of the things that keeps our brains constantly lit up, right? Just all over this part, that part, that part, all over the place, and we don't get tired that way, because even at night when we're sleeping, the brain is still lit for most of us. For some of us, it's like a light bulb where it's just like, I'm going to put it on dim. But, like, this is what I'm talking about. The ability to just tell stories within stories, not just with the words, but with the pictures and the overall picture. Damn it. If this book had no words, well, it would be less of a story. But the point is, it would still tell a story. It would still tell multiple layers of a story, and I loved it. And then just, flipping the page like this, and then just all of a sudden, I got to do like this? What? You're making me actually move my hands instead of just, my finger and my wrist. No, like this, all right? There's going to be finger and wrist moving jokes and touche. Then you get to a scene like this where it's just, no, here's just this is what you typically see in a comic book. Here's very pretty art, right? Pretty art is one thing, but being able to do the things that I explained before, that's a whole different level. That's an understanding of a comic book that is next level, and the reason why people like that should always remain on comic books. In this particular case, here's just pretty art. And here's just Wolverine's hand. Anybody remember where Wolverine's hand came from? Remember the Dead Man Logan stuff? Yeah, that. The Old Man Logan stuff. It was actually the Old Man Logan first. One of those later issues when he was fighting against, I forget what she was called at the time, but it was basically Mariko Yashima. It was his girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? His ex-wife, basically. Mariko Yashida. There we go. She actually cut off his hand, old man. So that's actually Old Man Logan's hand. So when Wolverine's sitting here talking about memories, and you're just like, where did those memories come from? How did he suddenly lose his hand? How come he has adamantium on there again? It's because that was Old Man Logan. That was his hand. That's where that comes from. Saying stuff like that is just like, bruh, bruh. Percy is not just, telling his own story. He's continuing the stories of others. So he's continuing Ed Brisson's story in this particular case. Mother effing kudos to you on that. Like, that was a amazing moment right there. And this is one of those things where you see the succinct abilities and the joint abilities of writer and artist, where they both combine, they meld, form feet and legs, form arms and body, I'll form the head, and suddenly they have storytelling, which is another version of the Voltron Force. Anyway, they have incredible storytelling. I love this. Continuity was used in this in multiple different aspects because the Maverick character and stuff like that. New story was being told. New history was being made through retcons, but not the kind of retcon where you're just like, now everything's changed. Nothing was changed. Things were simply explained in better detail. This is what you would basically call a fantastic comic book. Now, was there a great story in here? No. Much like with X-Men 17, there was actually more story being told in here. In my opinion, there was more story being told in here than the X-Men comic book, but by like that much, right? But it was more about, let's get some action, let's get some, some good nostalgia in here. Let's actually get people back on board with who these characters are. Let's try and get people like me who are being lost. Now, mind you can't only use nostalgia on me. That's one trick, that's one tactic that you can use once in a while. I'm glad this happened on the same week, Wolverine and X-Men. I'm glad they both happened on the same week. But that being said, this isn't going to keep me in a comic book. This is going to, satisfy me for a minute. You know what I'm saying? And I know it's not just about me. I'm not so narcissistic as to believe something as idiotic as that. I'm saying, people like me, all right? The people who, like, we're older and we've seen these stories before, to remind us of our stories, but don't retell us the stories. I don't want a damn reboot, but a good reminder and a show of continuity, which is exactly what this and the X-Men 17 comic book does. Yeah, that's actually exactly what I and a lot of people my age are looking for. If you want to keep us older readers, this is one of the ways that you remind us, hey, there's actually a lot going on here. So this is awesome. So this fills me with a lot of joy. This makes me say, definitely, because I was already going to be staying on Wolverine anyway. I love the artist on here. Percy is sometimes hit or miss, but for the most part, he's more hit than miss, which is, a good thing. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. DDP right there. What do you call it? I really enjoyed this comic book all the way to the end where he's discovered and how he's discovered. Like, you see the Kingpin standing right next to him. Kingpin ain't gonna recognize Wolverine when he sees him. Oh, he's got a white jacket, a slightly different haircut, and an eye patch. Come on, man. Like, who do you think you're at? That's your disguise? An eye patch? Why don't you just get a pair of glasses and all of a sudden, who am I? Where'd Professor Bill go? You remember, what was it, Bad Man or something like that? Anyway, this is, look, Professor Bill's back. Dun, 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 Black Panther Man. This was a really fun comic book. I liked this. And I don't want them to necessarily continue down this exact route. You can, when you just use the same tropes over and over again, it gets tedious, it gets boring. But you throw in a quick trope like this, like, hey, flashback to the past, boom, 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 boom. Maybe it's not going to catch the newer audience, but you have other things to catch that newer audience. For the older audience, that could catch us this time, right? You got to keep on switching up. If you're going to do everything by tropes, by all means. But one of the things I like is that Percy doesn't rely on tropes. He doesn't. He did in this particular case, but like, that's not his only bag of gimmicks. That's not his only bag of tricks. You know what I'm saying? He's much better than that. But every so often throwing in a well used trope that is going to work, as long as you don't overdo it, no, it works really well, and that's evidenced here. This was a really good comic book. I think that there was something for everybody in this. And I can't wait to see the story actually progressed further in here. This was a great little interlude issue where it's like, we had to get Maverick back. That was the main purpose in here. We're also going to introduce a new plot. Wolverine wants to know what's up with this right here. And it could be a simple thing where it's just like, oh, I found out this actually came from Old Man Logan. I will take this. I will do something with it later. I or some other writer will do something with this at some future point. But boom, we're just simply addressing, people are wondering what happened to the hand. I will address where the hand is since Brisson didn't. Boom. Boom. That right there. So much was actually done in this comic book. And for something that comes out monthly or so, even if it starts coming out, twice a month, but whatever, everything, for something that comes out monthly, you can't really ask for much more than that. A little bit of plot progression, every so often a little bit of character progression. Here, there wasn't really any character progression. It's just more of the idea of, hey, Wolverine, he's still the Wolverine that you know and love, and we're still going to keep moving on with the story. A little bit of plot progression would be good, or at least remind us of character progression, at least remind us of who the character is so that we know that you know who the character is. This is how you tell a good comic book story. I'm digging on this, and again, this is not the only way to tell a good comic book story. Sometimes just doing a lot of progression with the story and everything else will actually help. Story is the thing that has to be progressed the most. Story has to be progressed the most. After that, you probably should start working on your plot, because otherwise it's just the same old thing. Yeah, there's a problem and somebody has to fix it. And it's like, can that problem eventually be solved and then we move on to another problem? Because that could just be recycled, slightly different. The same outline, but just put different words in there, different subject and people and things like that. And the character doesn't have to be regressed as much. And Marvel has evidenced that by the fact that how old is Wolverine? How old is Spider-Man? How old is Batman and Superman? You know what I'm saying? Like, how much have they really changed, right? That said, as long as you keep the idea that that the story has to be progressed at some point, we're okay. We should be okay. You know what I'm saying? So this was good. Even if the story in here was more like a stopgate, reminding of stories that were kind of like left out there, and unresolved stories from other artists, other writers. I love what Brisson did. I thought it was fun that he left the handout there for somebody else to pick up. Picking up body parts. Ew! Who actually walked up and said, "Ooh, this looks fun." I love that this book was done in this way. Anyway, really long review. I'm just going to start repeating myself at this point. Like the video, watching that. I'll talk to you guys later. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.